Hi, this is your Sapnil Bharti, and we are here at Open Source Summit in Vienna, Austria, and we have with us once again after a very long time, Greg Kroah-Hartman. Greg, it's great to have you back on the show after a very long time.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a while.
It has been a while.
Yes.
COVID happened,
COVID
and then you
happened.
moved. So
I moved, but yeah, different conferences, different
exactly,
places.
yeah. We did some remotely, but sitting down with you in person, it has a totally different,
That's more fun.
different. So I will start with for the basic. Tell us where you live these days, because people always, where is Greg?
Oh no, I live in the Netherlands. I have for the past 6-7 years now. I'm resident there, so all's good. Yeah. Not going to move for a while.
Perfect. Now let's talk about also what are you doing these days?
Oh, same thing. Kernel development, maintainer of different subsystems, stable kernel trees, and now CVEs. We're responsible for all the CVEs. We're a CNA, or it's the certificate naming authority for number authority for the kernel. So any CVEs that need to be assigned from the kernel, I'm one of the members of the team that did that.
And you have been doing this for a very long, how many, 30 years, 35 years?
No, I'm a new person, so only since like 98.
So it's only since 98.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people around here. There's a maintainer summit right now that have been doing this longer than me. So yeah,
And I was talking to Linus yesterday, and one thing that he was worried about, that you have so much on your plate.
Me? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and then he also said that no, you have automated a lot of things. So what I also want to understand is that how much is on your plate?
No, that being said, I do a lot of different things, but there's also a lot of people helping me. So on the stable kernel, it's me and Sasha Levin. Not just me. Sasha does a lot of really good work there. I think we're about equal about the work that he does there. He picks from one section of patches, and I pick from another section of patches, and he does a lot of work there. The CVE work, Sasha, and then Lee Jones is also helping me out with that as well. So there's 3 of us doing that work, so it's not just me. And then the normal maintainership stuff. It's just most of my subsystems have a co-maintainer, but so it's not just me. So some things are automated. I can just respond to some emails with one click of a button with here's the form letter of what you got wrong. But yeah, that's fun.
And are you folks still doing all the work over email? Or you
Everything's email. Yeah, email's still fastest. There's no tool for kernel development that's better. That being said, we have good tools to make that easier. We have really good tools. One called B4, Constantine, who's the kernel.org sysadmin works for Linux Foundation. He's giving a presentation right now about all the tools that he's been working on to make maintainers' jobs easier and developers' jobs easier. We have tools that make things easier to submit patches through email and then respond to them through email, but the tools are all local. And so you can offline and whatnot, and you can search the mailboxes of the mailing list easier. You can get feeds of development stuff easier. So there's always more work to be done. There's the ResBot tracker, which Torsten does to track regressions. That also ties into a lot of these tools. So while we rely on email for discussions, conferences are great. In-person communication is great. Last weekend I was in Copenhagen for the RISC Kernel conference, and that was really good to get in a room and talk to people directly. I know like some of the conversations we've had where I know I'm talking past somebody and they're talking past me, and then just sit down and we talk for 3 hours and we work it out, and that's just how things work. So, but then we had very specific, we knew what we needed to talk about by that point in time, so it was good.
Yeah, you have mentioned earlier also that you have been talking over email, but you met and suddenly the things were fixed. Very in person, things can move very fast.
For some things,
Yeah,
yes.
some things.
But I mean, yeah. But
not with every case.
No,
but
but that's also a good thing. Email's a good way to get the easy things out of open, and then you know what you need to focus on when you do have that chance to see somebody, right? So it's like an initial meeting. Like sometimes people we have meetings for some things online for technical things. Like, oh, hey, we're talking about this. Let's just sit down and have a video conference. Are you free on this time? It's like, yeah, okay, let's do that. So we do that a lot too.
So you like video conferences?
If it's about
Linus doesn't.
If it's about technical things, yeah. I have too many meetings that are not about technical things. Technical things are great. So like sometimes it's like, we need to work this thing out. I've had talks with other developers a lot of times, so I have no problem doing that. And that's fun, because then some things are better. Discussing technical things are very good in email because you can go through the details and specifics and review. But sometimes the concepts of like, hey, what are you doing here? What do we think? Sometimes it's better technical, just different communication.
Different, yeah, depending on the problem, some problems can be done better privately over email, where you have your own time At some time you open the laptop next to each other and solve it. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, it just depends on the thing.
Exactly.
It's just we take advantage of all the different ways we communicate.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why conferences are really important.
They are important. Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about developer. I also want to understand the kind of ratio of developer. Also, I have been covering this field for a very long time. But a lot of new folks, they don't even know, because everything has become as a service. We don't interact with software as much as we used to. Even I used to play with Plasma, KDE, all those things, but now everything runs somewhere on the cloud, and I just run a client. Have you seen any change in the community? Do you see still you folks are, Linus is a great example of the passionate people. You have invested your whole life in that. Do you see it's the same kind of, or you see that some things have changed?
Well, some things have changed in that it's different technology, but some things are really good. So like I was just meeting when I was in Hong Kong at the conference there, somebody was talking to me about there's a new scheduler add-on so you can write eBPF programs for the scheduler. And it turns out a bunch of people that work with the Steam Deck are kids that are writing schedulers in Rust and loading into their Steam Deck to try and get better performance. And there's a huge community built up about that. There's communities built up for let's make a Linux distro that works really good for gaming systems. And they're doing respins that's based on the work that was done for the cloud computing for CoreOS. And it's evolved into this thing for these immutable game systems. So there's all these niche communities that are forming up. And so no, I don't think there's any lack of that. And that's a very personal thing. A lot of people, you can run Windows games really good on a Steam Deck. Yeah. It's amazingly good.
I have a Steam Deck. I have also a ROG LE. I have Legion. So I love. It's more about experiment, to see. I like to play on my 1490 GPU, but it's kind of, I think there are now new. Like earlier, everybody was on a laptop. Now we have new toys that we can experiment on.
Yeah, and those things are good. They're open, and you can work on them really well. And there's some cool laptops that have a gaming system attached to them. So it's different communities, and those are coming up well, and they're getting involved in kernel development because of that. Yeah, it's great because they're like, oh wait, this is an itch. Oh, I can do a scheduler in user space, and but this isn't quite working, and I'm digging much power, and they dig into that, and that's great. That's scratching your own itch and doing that type of thing. Or, hey, I want to do a pass-through to my Steam Deck of this device that doesn't, because I want a different type of controller. I saw some patches recently for that. That's great. So people are doing that. And yes, it's all different, but hardware is different. Linux is unique in a software project in that it's not finished because hardware keeps changing. So we keep reacting to what's there. So these are constant changes that we're going to need to do in order to get it to work for you. So people coming in add those changes, and it's great.
And Steam, I think Valve has done a great job because when I run Steam, I don't even realize that I'm running Linux, or XFCE and all those days. Android is a great example, I think. And which brings me to the point, we had this discussion past also. You say, yeah, we dominate the world, Linux says, So how do you feel today? Because, everything has become so abstracted, we don't even know what is running, Whether you look at EVs or whether you look at gaming system, where is Linux now?
It's everywhere. So I joke, we're anything from cow milking machines to helicopters on Mars, right? Mega super yacht stabilizers to your 3G cell tower. The modem in your all Apple iPhones is running Linux. So Linux is now all the iPhones for 5G. All the 5G stuff is Linux, which is crazy. Think about that. So we're succeeded everywhere, but that's a really unique thing. So Linux is unique in that for when we're identifying security bugs, I don't know what your use case is. So I can't say whether this is going to be a security bug for you or not. All I can do is define, hey, this was a bug that we fixed. And mark it as here, it's classified as a vulnerability by the definition of what a vulnerability is, which is an odd definition, but that's up to somebody else. So then you need to see if this fix applies to you and go from there. But yeah, we are everywhere and we're used in so many different ways, but we're a hammer, we're a tool for somebody to solve their problems. We're there to make the hardware look unique so you can solve your real problem. And that's what Linux is great. It's used for people to do what they really want to do. The Home Assistant guys are here. I talked to them. Home Assistant runs on Linux, runs on Raspberry Pis, runs on anything. And that's using Linux as a base to do personal home automation. And that's a great project to get involved with and do stuff. So that's cool. You should talk to them. They're here somewhere.
Are there any use cases where you're like, hey, this is ideal, but you're still not able to tap into that?
Tap into that?
Any use case where you're like, hey, this is one thing that has evaded Linux, and you want it to be in your bag as well?
Yeah, no. I always, yeah, it's like, what we haven't we conquered yet? No, it's, I hear about, we're used in more and more areas that I never knew, like all the windmills, all the wind
I was
generators.
talking
Those
to
are all,
Linus. He was like the only thing he's like those microcontrollers because
yeah.
RTOs. That's where But
The
I was talking to
microcontrollers are
K.
cool.
But I was talking to K.
Yeah, Zephyr took over that.
Yeah.
Zephyr's great. Zephyr took that tiny 16 and 32-bit no MMU processor market over because it's an open collaborative model. It works really well. Zephyr's wonderful. There is a boundary. Everybody's like, how small can you shrink Linux and how big can you get Zephyr? And there's a little boundary overlap on some of the tinier Raspberry Pi controllers. But what's your use case? And pick and choose for what you want there. Yeah, we have gotten bigger, but we've gotten bigger because more people need more features. So things like that. Zephyr solves that solution really well.
And Linus being pragmatic, he said, but eventually those those devices grew up, so they become.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody else that said, well, why isn't Linux working really good on this small thing? I'm like, well, if you spend 5 cents more, Linux will work great on that thing. So, but then hardware designers don't. I'm like, okay, then you're stuck with Zephyr. So use that. So you're dictated by your hardware design. And yeah, the chips keep getting cheaper and cheaper. You can, the EMC32, probably that's the wrong name. Those really tiny chip, small ones, they now run Linux. Because the RISC-V core in there. so it's like, and that you can get for way under $1.
Yeah, and that brings to another interesting point. Raspberry Pi but now it's becoming more expensive. It used to be $35, but I got Raspberry Pi 5 from Micro Center. It was like $70. But this is more about demand and supply issue versus. But the good thing is that there are so many devices now. I mean, next door they have a cool device. They are running on Linux as well. I want to just switch the topic and talk about the maintainer and developer. First of all, just for the sake of people, what is the difference between developers and maintainers? Because, please go ahead.
So think of a maintainer as an editor. So I take the work that somebody else does, like a writer, and I review it, and I say, hey, this looks wrong, this looks good, why don't you just make this change and give it back? And I used to be a developer, so I know those skills, right? So just like an editor used to be a writer. So it's the same idea. So you're responsible as a maintainer for making sure that contributions fit into the overall scheme. That being said, also I'm responsible that if I take your code, now I'm responsible for it. So I want to make sure that you're going to be around, that it's good enough that I can do that, or that I can trust you. And this is really big in Linux kernel development. I can trust you, not that you're going to get it right, but that when you get it wrong, because we all get it wrong, you'll be here to fix it. So there's some people that I take patches from and changes from that I'm like, okay, great, yeah, looks basic, and I take it with almost no review, because I know that they're going to be there to fix it if it gets wrong. And that's the trust model. So as a developer to maintainer model. Otherwise, if you disappear, then I'm not responsible for it. And we've had that problem in the kernel many years ago. We had a very big subsystem that took a very big, scary feature, and they took it, and then like within a week or so, supposedly the email address disappeared. No response at all. So it took them like months to unwind the mess. So changing core parts of the kernel that everybody relies on is scary because everybody relies on it, and then me as a maintainer have to take it. But like somebody asked me yesterday, well, if I'm a developer and I send you a patch to work for my little tiny device, and you can't test it, how do you do that? I'm like, well, I trust you, because the only person that's going to affect is you, because you have the device, and now you're the maintainer. And they're like, but I can be the maintainer? I'm like, yes, you're the maintainer of that because it works for you. And they're like, oh, that's great. So that's the model there.
And developers can, they can also be one time, they were working on a device, they work in a company, they sent a patch, but maintainers
drive-by patches
exactly.
are wonderful, and because and we take 200 to 300 new contributions to the kernel every 3 months that are new developers who've never done anything, and that's great because you never know when they're going to come back, right? And we want those tiny changes because that's a little paper cut fix that somebody had, right? And we want to make it as easy as possible for that to be taken. So every project should be that as easy as possible to take things like that.
And what is the ratio of maintainer versus developers?
So we have 4,000 developers a year. Yeah, we have so many. I think we have 700 listed maintainers. Now it could go down to as small as a tiny sensor maintainer to a subsystem maintainer. There's different. It's ostensibly a tree, like a hierarchy of a pyramid, but really we can be routed around and whatnot. So it's different. I think we have 150 maybe core maintainers, but the kernel is very broad. It handles lots of different use cases and lots of different subsystems, and we're modular enough that we can do that in ways that don't touch on, like I won't touch on the networking people's toes usually, and they don't touch on mine, but we can if we need to. But then making changes across the whole tree can be hard because then you have to interact with 700 different maintainers. And we all work in a different way, and we're trying to unify that and make that easier. But it is possible. It's just difficult.
And how mature, sustainable is the maintainer community? Because, I mean, since you don't have hair, so I don't even know how old you are. I mean, you can tell from me.
It's
but
gray.
everybody is graying out. So you made you're talking to you're like, he made a smart decision. Nobody can judge how old. But the community is, how young or old. What are your concerns when it comes to the long-term sustainability of the kernel?
Well, I'm always concerned about that, but I mean, it's also good that we have people that have experience working on this stuff. I mean, the networking maintainer's been doing networking for 30 years. I've been doing USB for 20 some years. You want people with that knowledge. Other operating systems and projects don't have that. So you want experience, and you also want to make it easy for new people to come in. Again, we see 200 to 300 new people every 2 to 3 months. So we have a huge feed. The intern program that we have has 200 people applying for it, and we do interns in every quarter from 20 to 30 people. College students are doing this. Linux is being taught in universities all the time. We have a plethora of stuff. There's some really good universities that do system development. There's one in Amsterdam. There's one in Paris. There's a lot of good stuff. And those professors are involved in the community as well. And they get their students to contribute projects, and then they get those projects into the open source work, and that gets people into a job. And that's good. So yes, I want to make sure it's very easy for people to get involved and that we are sustainable, but also be able to support the maintainers that we have, because we want to keep those people. And it's important that companies realize that it's okay to pay somebody to be a maintainer. And that's a hard thing. I think there's maybe 4, maybe 5 people that are paid to be a maintainer full time, and that's it. That don't have another job out of the 700. They have a day job, and they have to work on the other things at the side, which is fine, but you need to be able to give maintainers time and effort to be able to make just the housework and go back and clean up your technical debt and review patches and other stuff. We need to give maintainers that ability to do that. And that's something we're actually talking about at the Maintainer Summit. We need to have a way to provide that when we need to do housekeeping or clean this stuff up. How are we going to fund that, and who's to do that work? And that's also a really good work for new people, because then they can go in and see, I got to clean up this technical debt, and I got to touch all these different subsystems, and they gain lots of experience doing that. So we have case studies and experience of doing that. We just have to find companies that are willing to support that. That's the thing.
So has the situation improved over years, or the problem is still the same in a way, one way or the other?
I don't know. It's always been there, right? It's always been there. We have had the luxury of some projects like the real-time Linux changes. The funding for that was also to do a lot of that housework and cleanup of technical debt. In order to get the real-time changes in the kernel, we had to change a lot of different stuff. That took 20 years, but a lot of that work, and Thomas talked way more about this than I, was to clean up that technical debt, and that funding required that work to happen, right? So it's very rare that projects allow that to happen or can fund that. Normally it's I need to get my new device working or this, which is normal, and that's fine, but sometimes you do have to say, oh wow, I have to rewrite the networking layer to handle 1 terabyte speeds or whatever's next. We've had to do that at different times to handle like gigabit, then 10 gigabit, 100 gigabit. So it'll get there, but as companies need it and as we realize it, hopefully the funding comes. I don't know if it's worse or better than before, but now that more people rely on Linux, we have a better advantage of the fact that people are invested in it. They want to see it succeed. And I was working with one very large company, and they say, the reason we use Linux, they had this big talk. And I was like, people are like, it's technically great or whatnot. They're like, no, it's free. It's cheaper than anything else out there. And if we need to make our change, we'll make our changes, submit it, and it's still cheaper than anything out there. So from a business point of view, this is still a very good bargain.
Like Linux Foundation, you are a fellow, Linus is a fellow. But
Shu is a fellow.
Yeah, yes, yeah. But do you also want more like commercial players so that it's like long-term sustainability where, as you said, we want selfish users, so their success is tied to the success of Linux. Would you prefer that model, or would you prefer foundation funding the maintainers?
I think we need them all, both. We need funding for people who are independent like Shua and Linus and me. Our contracts say they can't tell us what to do, we can't tell them what to do, so it's good. But we also want people who are working in corporations that know the business problem that they have and are trying to solve those solutions, and then are given the ability to do that work. So we need them both. We need all. So we need everything. We also want those businesses to realize, hey, if I pay this one of my people on staff to do this work, then they gain the experience, they know what to do, they're going to be a better developer for me, they have the knowledge, and it's going to be more valuable to me as a company. And that's very true for a lot, especially the networking subsystems. There's a lot of companies that sponsor that way. So yeah, it's kind of both.
Nowadays a lot of geopolitical crisis is happening. Also there's a rise of techno nationalism. You live in Europe. Are you seeing any kind of pushback in a way, or you're seeing that open source is actually creating a universal language where, despite political tensions, you can work across the board? You can work with Asia, with Europe, Africa, India, North America, or you're feeling some heat there?
So the good thing about open source is, like most of the governmental restrictions on other countries do not come into play because we're doing everything in the open. And we're academic, it's free flow of information. So yes, it works very well. Working very well with China, working well with other countries. That being said, there are governmental restrictions that do restrict on what we're legally allowed to work with. And that's just the part of the world, and we have to do and abide by those rules. But for the most part, yeah, open source is a great equalizer. We're providing a solution that somebody in a smaller country or something with not much resources can do things and get the local experience. I mean, Europe's big on the tech, Europeans' digital sovereignty. And that's great. France relies on Linux to run its government, which is great and whatnot. The Netherlands has a project right now to outsource everything to Microsoft, which a lot of people in the Dutch government are saying, wait, maybe that's not a good idea, because then we lose the ability to control our own destiny, right? So other governments are realizing that they can do this. It's a much more, it's a different type of investment on people rather than companies. But that payment often in people is a huge benefit, a huge enrichment to the local ecosystem and the local tech ecosystem. I'll point out France and Germany does that really well. There's some other, Germany is now sponsoring through its Digital Sovereignty Fund maintainers to work on open source projects. The Dutch government also has another sponsorship of open source projects as well. So it's a hit or miss that way, but I think it is a good equalizer that way. But we still have to abide by international law.
Yeah, but at least it opens the field in a way,
Oh, and so much more so than corporations.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there's a where's the barrier of money.
Right. Yeah. Anything else that, we touched upon a lot of core points. Anything else that you feel like, hey, Swapnil, that is really important? Let's talk about that also, you think. You want to talk about security quickly?
Security, yeah.
Yeah. We don't hear that many scary stories nowadays. Heartbeat and all those things happen in early days. But from security perspective, what is the state right now?
So the interesting thing is, the interesting numbers we're now classifying 60 to 55 CVEs a week, which is a definition of a vulnerability. And the definition of vulnerability is very fixed, it's very limited. It does not including losing your data. That doesn't count as vulnerable. But these are fixes that go into the kernel that are there. That being said, that number seems hugely high, right? But you don't so on your laptop you use about 3 to 4 million lines of those 30 million lines of code of the kernel. So that's 30 million lines of code I have to look at for all these CVEs. So the number seems high, but it's the equivalent of what Microsoft and what Apple and other people are putting out for their products that's used in a much more limited sense. So you see these high numbers, it's just see what's relevant for you. We provide the information saying this is a bug fix for this level, whatnot. That being said, Spectre Meltdown, hardware bugs are hard. We've had to work around them so much. We still keep having to work around them. It slows down users because they have to work around the hardware bugs, but that's actually the job of a kernel, is to unify and fix the hardware bugs. So they're annoying, they're a pain, but we're working through them and it's getting better. But Linus's old mantra of a bug is a bug is a bug at our level is very true, because I don't know if I fix a bug at this level, whether that was a security issue for you or not, because I don't know your use case. So our job is to, if you report it to us, we fix it and push out the fix as fast as possible. And we're doing pretty good. Again, we're fixing 60 to 55 security-related bugs a week. So,
And that's why we don't hear those scary stories.
no, it's
also.
not scary, but they're all, yeah,
I remember
some are
early
minor,
days, yeah.
some are major, but it's all
Yeah,
relative.
what I feel is that that you folks do a great job. Is patching is it depends on the vendor where the patch was ever applied. If you look at all the cases that have had. So, and I think because of the proliferation of open source Linux, we don't hear those scary stories anymore because that could also be a
Yeah, well, also there's laws coming into effect like the CRA, and there's a U.S. governmental law saying that you have to take updates and you have to have a system that is updatable, and that's great. I think that's really important because you see these really, really old systems that are vulnerable for really things and they're not being updated. You have to update it. I'm glad to see that that's happening.
Let's also talk about from the architecture point of view. ARM is becoming very, very popular. At one point, there was kind of a struggle between ARM and the Linux community. Yeah. But now, all those devices you talked about, Steam Deck and all those things. How is this change in the market dynamics affecting the Linux? Is it good for you folks, or you're like, hey, that's a big mess there?
It's good in that you see Linux being used on all these different architectures. RISC-V. So I'll call it hardware, the framework laptops. They announced the RISC-V motherboard. I actually ran into the developer of that in Hong Kong, and I now have RISC-V running on a Linux running on a RISC-V laptop. And that's a low-cost solution for something that wouldn't have happened before, and that's a whole different market fit. Competition's good. I want competition operating systems. Competition in chips are good because you get ideas and you work with them. See what AMD did to Intel was great. Good competition. ARM's doing that, finally invading into the server space. Competition's good in that type of stuff. It's good for consumers, so I want to see that happen. ARM's doing great. They're, RISC-V's doing much better as well. RISC-V's put out a whole bunch of stuff saying they need better software support, and here's the roadmap of how we're going to do it, which is good. I want to see that happening, and that's all based on Linux, so I'm very happy about that.
When you're not working on the kernel, what hobbies do you have? What do you do in your free time?
Hobby? Oh, I don't think I really have many hobbies anymore. Hanging out with my family, travel. Oh, hiking. Me and my wife do a lot of hiking these days. So, being in the Netherlands is flat, so we go to Spain or we go to southern Germany, go hiking and stuff like that. So we're doing that more now that the kids are a little older. So we get to go off and go hiking. That's good.
Greg, once again, thank you so much for taking time out and talk to me. It's been a long time, but let's try to talk often,
sooner,
and because always pleasure to talk to you, and also it's always fun to catch up. Once again, thank you.
Thanks.